In May 2017, Icon Aircraft's chief test pilot John Carco and director of engineering Kagri Seva flew a company A5 amphibian from Vacaville, California, climbed to 3,700 feet and descended to between 30 and 50 feet above the surface of Lake Berryessa. They entered Little Portuguese Canyon, a box canyon surrounded by terrain rising to 1,400 feet above sea level. When they realized the canyon was a dead end, the pilot applied full power, pitched up, and attempted a 180-degree turn. The canyon walls closed in. The aircraft struck terrain at 66 knots. Both men died. 6 months later, retired Major League Baseball pitcher Roy Halladay died when his A5 hit the Gulf of Mexico off the coast of Florida, the accident investigation finding evidence of aggressive low-altitude maneuvering before impact. In both cases, the aircraft's ballistic parachute system was not deployed. In both cases, the reason was the same. There was not enough altitude for the parachute to work. Icon Aircraft had built the A5 specifically to be safe. It had an engineered spin-resistant airframe. It had a ballistic parachute. It had an angle of attack indicator prominently mounted where both occupants could always see it. It had been marketed as an aircraft that dramatically lowered the barrier to safe personal flight. And 2 of its first fatal accidents involved trained, experienced pilots, one of them a company test pilot, flying into terrain at low altitude in a way that none of those safety features could address. This is the story of the Icon A5, the most ambitious general aviation startup of the 2000s, the aircraft that raised 1,400 deposits on its order book before delivering a single unit. The company that burned through a Chinese investor's capital at between $750,000 and $850,000 per week at its worst point. And the aircraft that still exists today under its third ownership structure, with 221 units delivered globally, owned by a German industrial conglomerate that makes sewing machines. Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you are watching from. And if you fly or have flown an amphibian, drop your type below. The A5 was designed in Vacaville, California, beginning in 2006 by former U.S. Air Force F-16 pilot Kirk Hawkins and product designer Steen Strand. The explicit ambition was to change who flew, not to build a better aircraft for the existing pilot population, to build an aircraft that expanded the population itself by making flying feel as accessible as riding a personal watercraft. The technical decisions that follow from that ambition are coherent. A carbon fiber composite monocoque hull with Dornier-style side spunsons that provide hydrostatic roll stability on the water and serve as boarding platforms. A rear-mounted Rotax 912 is sport pusher engine at 100 horsepower on fuel injection, eliminating carburetor ice and manual mixture management. A wing planform with cuffed leading edges and vortex generators engineered specifically for spin resistance. The inboard wing stalls before the outboard section, meaning the ailerons remain effective for lateral control even when the main wing root is fully stalled. An angle of attack indicator atop the glare shield. A whole airframe ballistic parachute integrated as standard. Manual wing folding to 34.8 feet extended or 8.5 feet folded, small enough to store in a single car garage. The performance envelope is light sport class. Maximum takeoff weight between 1,510 and 1,570 pounds, empty weight of 1,080, useful load of 430 to 490 pounds. Maximum operating speed 95 knots, normal cruise 85 to 95 knots, range 427 nautical miles with reserves. Takeoff from water in 840 feet, landing on water in 700. The cockpit is wide at 46 inches, a deliberate ergonomic decision reflecting the automotive product design influence on the program. 2 adults of average size sit comfortably side by side, without the shoulder-to-shoulder compression that characterizes many 2-seat light aircraft interiors. The weight allocated to the spin-resistant wing architectures, the cuffed leading edges, internal structural reinforcers, the specialized span-wise airfoil sections, and to the integrated ballistic parachute system makes the A5 the heaviest aircraft in its competitive category at 1,080 pounds empty. The Super Petrel LS weighs approximately 770 pounds empty. The C-Max M22 approximately 730. That 350-pound weight penalty directly reduces the useful load available for pilots, passengers, and fuel. Two adults averaging 200 pounds each consume 400 pounds of the 500-pound useful load, leaving roughly 90 to 100 pounds for fuel, approximately 15 US gallons of the 20-gallon tank capacity. The aircraft becomes range-constrained in real two-adult operations. This trade-off is the engineering cost of the safety systems, and it is a real one. The price: approximately $359,000 to $400,000 for a fully configured aircraft with a Garmin G3X glass panel and integrated autopilot. That price is the first number that explains a great deal of the company's commercial history. The Skoda Aeronautica Super Petrel LS, a Brazilian composite biplane amphibian with 100 knots cruise, greater useful load, and the same Rotax engine family, lists at approximately $189,000 to $207,000. The C-Max M22, a carbon composite monocoque from Brazil with useful load approaching 600 pounds, runs $168,000 to $195,000. For every dollar spent on an Icon A5, you could have bought two competitor amphibians with money to spare. The A5's design philosophy produced a genuine aerodynamic achievement. The spin-resistant airframe is real, the passive stall characteristics are better than a standard LSA, the angle of attack indicator is a meaningful safety tool when used correctly. The problem was the marketing that ran alongside it. Early promotional campaigns positioned the aircraft as a power sports product. Aviation as jet skiing, flying as equivalent to riding a high-performance boat. Footage of the A5 skimming lake surfaces at 50 feet, banking hard through canyon terrain, performing the kind of dramatic low-altitude maneuvering that makes compelling marketing content. The company leaned into the sensory appeal of the product and communicated, whether intentionally or not, that the aircraft's safety features were a substitute for the disciplined operational practices that traditional aviation training instills. The fatal accidents of 2017 were the consequence. John Carco was Icon's most experienced pilot. He flew into a box canyon at 50 feet above the water and applied full power in an attempt to turn around when the terrain rose on three sides. The NTSB found the probable cause was the pilot's failure to maintain terrain clearance during low-altitude maneuvering. Not the aircraft, the pilot. But the context, a marketing environment that presented low-altitude lake flying as the primary experience the aircraft enabled, had created an operational culture in which that maneuver seemed appropriate. The whole airframe parachute did not save either pilot in 2017 because both aircraft were below the minimum deployment altitude when the accidents occurred. A ballistic parachute needs several hundred feet of altitude to extract, inflate, and decelerate the aircraft to a survivable descent rate. 50 feet above a lake surface provides none of that. The parachute is a recovery system for altitude emergencies. It cannot help at ground level. This is the fundamental tension in the Icon A5's design philosophy. A safety system that works at altitude combined with marketing that encouraged flying at altitudes where the safety system cannot function. If you are still with this story, if the gap between what the safety systems could do and what the marketing said they could do is landing, hit subscribe and drop A5 in the comments. The purchaser agreement controversy and the Chinese investor story are the parts that made industry insiders genuinely angry. The accident record was damaging. The purchaser agreement controversy preceded it, and in some ways did more immediate commercial harm. In April 2016, Icon published its initial production purchasing contract. The terms were unlike anything previously seen in general aviation consumer contracts. Mandatory factory-performed airframe overhauls every 2,000 flight hours or 10 years. A hard structural life limit of 6,000 hours or 30 years, after which the aircraft had to be scrapped. Continuous flight data, cockpit audio, and video recording owned by Icon. Broad litigation waivers prohibiting owners from suing the manufacturer. Strict regulation of resale and pilot training access. The Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association and the Experimental Aircraft Association both issued public criticism. The argument was straightforward. These were not standard product liability terms. They were an attempt to maintain manufacturing control over an asset after transfer, to collect surveillance data on owner operations, and to limit the legal recourse available to buyers if something went wrong. Icon CEO Kirk Hawkins issued an open letter acknowledging the backlash and released a revised contract in May 2016. The cockpit camera requirement came out. the 30-year scrap mandate was removed. The factory overhaul labor cost was capped at $15,000. The anti-litigation clauses were stripped. The damage to market confidence, however, had already been done during a critical production ramp phase when the company needed every unit of goodwill it had. In 2017, Shanghai Pudong Science and Technology Investment Co. Limited, PDSTI, became Icon's majority controlling shareholder. The investment was intended to solve Icon's recurring capital problem. The company was burning money faster than its production line could generate revenue. The equity structure produced a corporate governance crisis that ran alongside the operational and reputational problems. In June 2021, minority shareholders, including co-founder Kirk Hawkins, filed derivative litigation in Delaware Chancery Court, alleging that PDSTI had seized operational control of the board, mismanaged corporate assets, and attempted to transfer Icon's intellectual property, composite design systems, and manufacturing technology to China. In January 2022, the Wall Street Journal reported that the FBI and CFEUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, were examining the PDSTI transaction for potential national security concerns, specifically assessing whether the A5's carbon composite manufacturing technology and airframe design knowledge could be repurposed for military unmanned aircraft applications. Icon management denied the allegations. The investigation continued. By early 2024, the company was burning between $750,000 and $850,000 per week. The order book that had peaked near 1,400 deposits had not converted to delivered aircraft at anywhere near the required rate. On April 4, 2024, Icon filed Chapter 11 in the Delaware Bankruptcy Court with over $170 million in liabilities, $60 million in secured bank debt, $93 million in unsecured notes held by PDSTI itself. The bankruptcy court supervised a Section 363 asset sale. The stalking horse bidder was SG Investment America, an acquisition vehicle established by Dürkop Adler GmbH, a German industrial sewing machine manufacturer over 160 years old, owned by Shandong Group, which has indirect shareholder connections to PDSTI. In June 2024, bankruptcy judge Craig Goldblatt approved the sale to SG Investment for $15.79 million, completing in August 2024. Unsecured creditors received an estimated less than 1 cent on the dollar. Competing bids came from Lyndon Blue, vice chairman of General Atomics, the company that builds the Predator and Reaper military drones, and an undisclosed German industrial bidder. The bankruptcy judge chose the Shandong acquisition vehicle. It is impossible to read anything confident into what that outcome means for the technology transfer concerns that prompted the FBI investigation, since the legal record in bankruptcy proceedings does not address intelligence assessments. 221 A5 aircraft had been delivered globally as of late 2025. The aircraft is in production. The Vacaville headquarters and the Tijuana composite parts facility transferred to the new ownership. The type certificate is intact. The Rotax engine ecosystem that makes the aircraft maintainable in the field without specialized proprietary support continues to exist. The Icon A5 story is simultaneously a technical success and a commercial failure. The spin-resistant airframe works. The angle of attack indicator is a genuine safety tool. The wing folding system solves a real problem for pilots without hangar access. The carbon fiber composite hull is as aerodynamically clean as anything in its category. The Rotax 912 is as reliable as any engine in light aviation. The aircraft costs twice what comparable Brazilian amphibians cost, carries less useful load than its competitors at the same price tier, and spent 18 years generating enough negative press. The contracts controversy, the fatal accidents, the bankruptcy, the FBI investigation, the Chinese ownership dispute, to make it one of the most discussed and least financially successful aircraft programs in the history of the light sport category. 221 aircraft, 1,400 order positions at peak, 18 years of development, production and restructuring, $15.79 million at bankruptcy auction, owned by an entity connected to the same Chinese investor that contributed to the company's collapse. The A5 is a beautiful aircraft that cost too much, promised too much, and was marketed in a way that obscured the difference between what its safety systems could do and what its pilots needed to do for themselves. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Naval Report. We cover aviation, maritime technology, and the engineering decisions behind what is being built right now. The A5 is one of those decisions.